What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Matthew Walker, and how y'all doing today, man? Listen. I hope y'all doing good, staying well, staying healthy, all that great stuff. And listen, today we are continuing the Greatest Peak series by Thinking Basketball. I believe, bro, his name I can remember is Ben Taylor. You know what I'm saying? So I really appreciate you making this series, and you know what I'm saying, having us be able to watch. The original video will be in the description. And yeah, man. Listen, today we got Bill Walton's historic two-way impact, Greatest Peaks, episode 2. So without further ado, we're just gonna hop straight into this video, man. 3, 2, 1. Let's do it, man.
There's a mythology about Bill Walton that few players can match. Blazer Mania, that fiery mountain man beard.
This is the first time we're reacting to Bill Walton, by the way.
That ended his prime as soon as it began. His first two seasons were shortened by an assortment of ailments before a brief 2-year stretch in 1977 and 1978 that yielded an NBA championship and an MVP trophy. So, just how good were those 2 seasons? Was that brief peak enough to compete with the most dominant centers in NBA history? And was he the greatest passing big man of all time?
You are watching what greatness is all about.
Jeez.
Where's Larry Bird in all this? Has it blocked by Olajuwon?
Michael Jordan saves the day.
This series tackles one question. Who was the best at his best? We start at the ABA merger and go through the best multi-year stretches, examining the legends who provided the most on-court impact. These are the greatest peaks.
Let's do it.
Before we can estimate Walton's impact, it's important to understand the way the game was played before the three-point line. With so many shots funneled into the paint and no extra point for stretching out the court, defensive big men were titans back then. The definitive basketball archetype wasn't a high-flying scoring guard, but a dominant center. And no, not Wilt Chamberlain, but his rival Bill Russell. Russell's defensive genius reigned over the prior decade, where he won 5 MVPs without being a heavy scorer on offense.
Right.
That's worth repeating. Wilt Chamberlain once averaged 50 points per game in a season, but the zeitgeist of the time was to play like Russell. In 1967, after years of volume scoring, Chamberlain's own coach asked him to play like Russell, shoot less, pass more, protect the paint. And this led to a new record for wins and an end to the Celtics' 8 consecutive title streak. The search for the next Russell peaked in 1969 when a rookie, Wes Unseld, won the MVP by playing a team-centric pass, rebound, and defend role that Russell was glorified for playing. And that's exactly how Walton played, only with greater scoring skill than either Unseld or Russell.
Got you.
As a sophomore in college, he was compared to both Russ and Chamberlain, and as a junior authored arguably the greatest single-game performance in NCAA history, going 21 of 22 from the floor, en route to 44 points, and his 60th win in 60 college games up until that point. Not too shabby. The grainy signs of his offensive repertoire were on display. The bank shot, his activity, dexterity, and of course, the passing. Like most players, Walton probably peaked as a passer later in his career, especially with slightly more space to work with in the 1980s. Back in 77 and 78, at the height of his overall powers, his passing was defined by hitting swirling cutters from the mid and high post area. Some of these were like water polo passes, just flipping the ball over heads in really tight quarters. But the defining characteristic of these passes was speed and accuracy. Older centers could occasionally throw flashier passes than Walton from these cornerstone spots, but Walton's volume and efficiency was unmatched until that point in time. Note his little hop to create a better delivery angle over the top. Portland's half-court game was largely built off cutters buzzing around Walton like this. He has multiple options here if there's any opening, And his speed-accuracy combination resembles a modern quarterback, throwing tight short yardage completions. Today we might just see a crowded lane where everyone's covered, but Walton sees a pass behind the hoop, the only window to thread this needle through. Compare that to another Blazer big, Lloyd Neal, who misses a Walton special here, only to have Big Red show him how it's done. Walton's vision stems from reading the game so well at the team level, knowing who's supposed to go where and what options are available. With the overplay on the pass, he leads the cutter into space. And again, what accuracy on the release.
Hey, I love his IQ,
Walton's also known for his outlet passing, and he mostly flung these toward the mid-court after ripping down a rebound. It was almost like a single motion, grabbing and firing to start Portland's vaunted fast break. But he wasn't throwing touchdowns on these like some of the other great outlet passers of that era already were. And in the limited game footage in public, the one he tried got away from him a bit.
We gotta add, y'all. We gotta add. Pay your bills, man. You gotta pay your bills, man. I understand. Stop buffering. Hold up, y'all. Hold up. All right, we back.
Long and perhaps the best ever at finding cutters. All of Walton's missed games from injury give us insight into his value for Portland. In games where Walton was the only missing rotational player, Portland assisted on 54% of its field goals in 1977 and 1978. Add Walton in and that number jumped to nearly 58%. His outlet passing had a similar effect on pace. With Walton, the Blazers played at a slightly above average pace for the time, and without him, they averaged 4 fewer possessions a game, which would have made them one of the slower teams in the league. The total effect on offense was that the Blazers were 3.7 points better than average with him, but only 1.2 points better. Put some respect on Walton's name, man. That is still a solid offense without Big Bill, largely because his replacements were good scorers. Tom Owens averaged 19 points per game and 4 assists in 1979, and the aforementioned Lloyd Neal was a good scorer too. Walton was a similar scorer to those two, at least statistically, going to that jump hook as a bread and butter move. He had nice touch on this, and while it certainly wasn't the sky hook, that's for the next episode, Bill could release this cleanly most of the time without too much of a setup. It was a back-to-the-basket move, but it was also used at the end of a little face-up like this when headed right. He could also knock down mid-range jumpers, preferring to go glass on these whenever possible. Big Red could walk into these, but also liked a turnaround after a single dribble. His range on these jumpers was maybe out to 17 or 18 feet, probably limited by that funky form that kept his free throw shooting around 70% at his peak. His scoring moves were decisive like this, but he didn't possess an overwhelming scoring arsenal. Adjusted for inflation to 2020 numbers, Walton averaged about 20 to 21 points per 75 possessions during this 2-year peak, and his scoring efficiency was 4 to 5 percentage points ahead of the league. Interestingly, his scoring did slide a touch in his 19 playoff games, averaging closer to 17 points per 75 when adjusting for inflation, with slightly lower efficiency than in the regular season. During that 77 playoff run, Walton was the second leading scorer on the team, but only the fourth leading scorer when adjusting for pace, a testament to Portland's balanced attack built off of Walton's passing. But the Blazers weren't a dominant playoff offense, in part because of Bill's shortcoming as a scorer. He also added value with his activity, first as a cutter, knowing when to read this opening for a dive cut and lob. This kind of off-ball play adds value around higher-end talent, and it led to this vintage Blazer Mania sequence in the 1977 finals against Philadelphia.
What a sequence for the Blazers!
Walton was always looking for little soft spots in the defense, finding offensive rebounding opportunities and high percentage second chance points that cleaned up for his teammates.
Good read.
He wasn't a skywalker, but his size and quick leaping allowed him to finish plays around the rim and score off of rebounds like this, boosting his scoring numbers a bit in the process with these high percentage follow-ups. By the way, Walton was huge. His height is debated, but he wasn't much smaller than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who stood 7'2" without shoes, and here he is next to Robert Parrish, listed at 7'1", and Kevin McHale, listed at 6'10".
Jeez.
That size contributed to his crippling injuries, as his feet weren't anatomically capable of supporting his big frame, and the shock of all that running and jumping. Walton missed 3 full seasons before ramping his career back up in 1983 in San Diego. Again, he's not dwarfed by Kareem here at all, but boy did that size and mobility help him protect the paint.
Right.
Walton's massive impact on the game, his very inclusion in this series, is primarily because of his defensive value created with his length, awareness, and motor. Most 7-footers aren't super active and able to read the game, but back before the three-point line, this was arguably the most valuable trait in the entire sport. We'll see why in a moment.
Filming birds of prey is not for those who have a fear of heights. I graduated from the practice tree to the 200-foot monster.
Oh, no.
To fly and hold the eagle was a landmark of
Oh,
no. Classic because of the rules back then,
you
he
got
almost
that, bro.
served like
That's
a
all
goaltender, patrolling the area in front of the hoop and challenging all comers. The dangerous Doug Collins runs into a wall here, or I guess a Walton.
Right.
There's a good joke in there somewhere. But Bill was always really well positioned. He sagged off players without the ball in textbook fashion, but was ready to pounce in these spots.
Yep.
He was one of the most active big defenders in league history, helping when needed or stepping out and challenging shots in the mid-range, ambushing Pete Maravich here, who thought he was in the clear. You'll notice his hands are always out, clogging passing lanes so teams don't sneak those dimes through to cutters like the Blazers did, and his hands were active targeting the ball, here deflecting this jump pass.
Wow.
Like great rim protectors, he was accurate jabbing at the basketball, and he would pull his hand away to avoid fouling at times.
That jabbing would be that'd be annoying, bro. That's some good defenders.
Square, like some of the great
shot
blockers, and this meant that occasionally
they be doing that little, you know what I'm saying, that little jabbing
could slip one through.
Throw you off.
Here he slides down in position, but mistimes his jump, and that throws off the contest a bit. But his typical reactions were quick, and with sound position, he bothered so many shots. He wasn't a stiff either, comfortably chasing wings outside the paint to harass their jumpers. Remember, back then, bigs couldn't really be exposed on an island against quicker players because they didn't have to chase out to the three-point line.
Right.
The game in those days was built more around the post-up, with offenses running through the center. Unlike Walton, most high-end big men were looking to score more than pass, and that created even more defensive responsibility for the bigs of that era.
Heard you.
In the 1977 Western Conference Finals, Walton famously battled Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for 4 games, trying his best to sit on Kareem's lethal skyhook and force him left, with mixed results. That's better than most against Jabbar, and Walton's size and acumen helped slow Kareem a bit compared to normal centers. Here he tracks him well without the ball, happily forcing Jabbar left, but sometimes there's no stopping Kareem.
That's tough.
Walton also stayed active, working for better defensive position, here leading to a steal, and against more mortal figures, his man defense was highly effective, banging and then going vertical against Daryl Dawkins.
He got high defense and offense.
Squint
IQ,
a bit,
man.
and you'll see Hall of Famer Dan Issel, more of a shooting center, get stuffed by Walton on his jumper, and Bill was always using his size and positioning to defend opponents like this. He was the original big fundamental, taking a textbook approach to activity, positioning, vertical contests, and so on. We can see the effect his man defense had on opponents during this 1977 and 78 stretch by looking at the 48 games he played against other All-Star centers. For instance, Kareem averaged 25.9 points per 36 minutes on 61% true shooting against everyone else, but in 8 games against Walton averaged 24.5 on 57% true shooting. If we do this for the other 7 All-Star centers during these years, only Big Bob Lanier and another southpaw, Dave Cowens, avoid a pretty clear drop-off against Walton. Now, team factors influence data like this, but numbers like these crystallize the effect of a superstar defender. In total, these All-Stars scored nearly 2 fewer points per 36 on 4% worse true shooting against Walton, an effect that compares favorably to all but the all-time great post defenders. In many ways, Portland was built around Walton on both ends. Their guards could be more aggressive pressuring the ball with Big Bill behind them, while Portland didn't need another paint protector out there to take away from its speed and skill game on offense.
Gotcha.
If we go back to those games Walton missed, we can see how insanely valuable his defense was. The Blazers gave up about 103 points per 100 in the 26 games with just Walton missing, but only 95.6 with him in the lineup, a jump from the 3rd worst defense in the league to the very best defense in the league. This is likely beyond the offensive impact of any player in the first 30 years of the league, perhaps save for Oscar Robertson or Jerry West.
Wow.
Overall,
Gotta add. Get them bills paid, brother. Get them bills paid.
Perhaps save for Oscar Robertson or Jerry West. Overall, the Blazers were actually outscored in those 2 seasons without Walton. They had a negative adjusted point differential equivalent to a 37-win team. But with him, they had a plus 8.5 point differential, a 64-win pace.
Okay.
Among players to miss at least 20 games over a single or multi-year period, that nearly 10-point increase with Walton is the 2nd largest in the first 70 years of the NBA.
Wow.
And that came in an era of parity where winning 55 games was rare. Only Nate Thurmond, another defensive stud, was associated with a larger increase, but his team was far worse than those Blazers, who went a stunning 87-28 in those games with Big Bill and just 10-16 without him. Again, most of that value was defensive, so fittingly it was the Blazers' defense that shined in 19 playoff games, holding opponents nearly 5.5 points below their regular season scoring efficiencies. In those 2 seasons, Walton and company also played 8 games without their only other All-Star, Maurice Lucas, and in those 8 games, the Blazers went 8-0.
Hey.
These indicators, with players moving in and out of the lineup, do still have some noise. We can't say for certain Walton was worth 9.5 points, but 26 games is enough to know that he was likely worth at least, say, 6 points to those Blazers.
Right.
And that's an historically huge number. Combine that with other factors like Lucas's missed time, the playoff performance, and what we can see on film, and it's clear Walton was the linchpin of a dynasty.
Oh my gosh.
In 1979, with Michael Thompson, Clay's dad, replacing Walton in the starting lineup and some minor bench changes, the Blazers reverted back to playing just over 500 basketball, reinforcing Bill's massive impact.
Gotcha.
I think it's fair to look at their team construction and think that there isn't another center in league history who could have maximized that fit as well as the big redhead. Our best impact metrics that reach back in time view Walton as having, say, a top 40 peak in playoff history.
Okay.
His 2-year regular season numbers were similar, by the way. And these metrics respect his defense, likely reflecting how excellent his fit in Portland was. But even in a less optimal situation, they still suggest that he belongs in this kind of conversation. And given how well his defense and his passing would travel to other teams, I don't think there are 10 centers in NBA history who peaked higher than Bill Walton.
Hey, man. Wow. For the first time watching Bill Walton's game, I've learned a whole lot about him. I didn't know his IQ was that high compared to most centers. You know what I'm saying? So I put a lot of respect on his name. Real talk. He type of centers. The type of centers that I would love to have in my squad, man, my team. So seeing those little cut lanes, what he do off the ball, that stuff matters. That really do matter, cause that stuff gets the easy points, and developing team wins. And then seeing his IQ on defense, high IQ on defense, good help side, active hands, you know what I'm saying, to not allow jump passes and stuff like that, skip passes. And then good, jabbing, high contested shots, staying low on the ground. All these type of things, man, he got really high IQ for. So I got a lot of respect for Bill Walton's game. No cap, man. So great video too, man. Great video. Two-way center, man. You know what I'm saying? That's what's up for real. But that's a great video. And then he was shooting. He could shoot that thing, bro. Doing turnaround jumpers from the elbow up the free throw. That's tough right there, man. But yeah, man, hope y'all enjoyed this video right here. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Get Basketball again. But yeah, hope y'all stay well. Stay healthy, stay blessed. Thank you guys very much, man. And peace. I'm out.